Welcome to the Phillip Wylie Show. Take a look behind the curtain of professional hacking and hear compelling discussions with guests from diverse backgrounds who share a common curiosity and passion for challenges and their job. And now, here's your host, offensive security professional, educator, mentor, and author, Phillip Wylie.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Phillip Wylie Show. Today I'm joined by Dr. Eric Cole. We've been connected on social media for a while, haven't got to meet in person, so this is the closest thing we've had to meeting in person, but I've been following his career as long as we've been connected. He's doing some pretty interesting stuff and has a pretty amazing social media presence. Does a lot of good stuff with personal branding, which is one of the topics I love is personal branding, because personal branding can do so much for your career. And too many times, cybersecurity professionals, for the sake of OPSEC, put too much attention in trying to be unknown. And then when it comes to instances where they need to be known, they're like looking for jobs and so forth. It just makes it a little more difficult. So personal branding is a big thing, and the doctor's doing a great job with it. So welcome to the show.
Pleasure to be here, my friend. Thank you.
Yeah, so like I said, it's good to finally connect with you. You do some pretty amazing stuff, and you've been in cybersecurity quite a while. So yeah, let's before we start out, why don't you kind of introduce yourself and then share your hacker origin story, kind of how you got started.
So I'm Eric Cole. I've worked in security for 30 years, and I got started sort of an interesting twist where I was majoring in computer science in the 80s. And back then, a computer science degree was electrical engineering with some programming courses. So I'm sitting there, I remember it was on a Thursday afternoon. It's a rainy day, and it's in 4chan class. And I'm just like, what am I doing with my life? Like, this is the worst thing ever. 4chan programming in 1989 was terrible. It was like, it was not a fun programming language. It was not efficient. It was basically mathematics gone wrong. And I'm sitting there going, what am I doing? So something told me, go to the co-op office. Now, class ended at 3:30. Co-op office ended at 4:30. It was a 20-minute walk in the rain, but something told me, you must go today. And I'm a firm believer, even today, listen to that voice. The universe is always watching out for you. So I walk in the rain, soaking wet, show up to the co-op office at 4:05, and I'm like, hey, here for an intern. And they're like, how did you know? I said, how did I know what? They're like, you must have known. And I'm like, no, what are you talking about? They're like, every 2 years, the Central Intelligence Agency comes and recruits on campus, and they're coming tomorrow, and we have 2 slots left. Would you like one of them? And I'm like, sure. They're like, now we're not going to have time to prep you because we close in 15 minutes, but just show up, fill the slot for us, and then we'll prep you later. So what I find sometimes is being naive and not being aware of what's at stake, you tend to be more relaxed, more focused, and your true personality comes out. So it didn't register with me like the CI, like it didn't register me like what they were doing. So I just went into the interview like, yeah, whatever. I'm just sort of super chill. Like I'm talking to you, Bill, right now. We're just having a casual conversation. And I go to leave. They're like, oh, by the way, here's the packet. Once again, totally naive. I walk out and the people at the co-op office are like, what did you do? I'm like, what do you mean, what did I do? They're like, only one other person got a packet today, and you're the second person. That means they want you to apply for a job. I'm like, cool. So I apply for the job. They fly me down. I pass the clearances. And then what's interesting is at a co-op at the CIA, you are a free resource. So it's actually a reverse interview. Now, when you're interviewing with the shops, they're trying to convince you to come work for them. So I worked at a programming shop. I interviewed a networking facility, interviewed this other one in a small little department called Office of Security, which was mainly physical security in 89. And everyone, including my advisor, said, go for networking, go for networking. I love getting advice. I don't always listen. And I'm like, this cybersecurity thing sounds really cool. And everyone's like, oh, it's just a fad. It's going to sort of boil out. It's not going to be a big deal, Eric. If you go with networking, you'll be set for life. Cyber, not so sure. I went with cyber, And I guess you can sort of predict how the rest of my career turned out from there. So that's sort of my sort of origin of how I got into cybersecurity.
Yeah, that's a pretty cool story because you hear about people through the industry that have gotten their starts through the NSA and stuff. But that's pretty cool. I think you're probably the first person I can think of that I know that actually got a job or internship with the CIA. I bet that was pretty interesting.
Oh, it definitely was. And sort of just going off the origin story, the career changing moment was 6 months into my intern. We're in the bubble, which if you've ever seen John Clancy movies, it's that big auditorium at the CIA headquarters, hosting around 4,000 people. And I'm sitting in the back, all hands meeting with the Department of Science and Technology. The new director is up there briefing, and she's talking about how this new frontier that we need to explore and look at, the internet. Now, remember, this is still 1990. The web wasn't invented until 92. Google wasn't founded until 97. So, like, we're talking early on. And they're talking about how we're going to replace radio frequency with the internet. Me being, once again, young and naive, they're like, are there any questions? Now, at the government, and especially the premier spying organization, the CIA, that's a formality. You don't actually ask questions. Nobody does that. So I raised my hand. And I remember my boss sitting in the front row with all the other directors, looks back and she's going like this. And I thought she was waving to me. And she's like, no, like, put your hand down. Like, what is wrong with you? So they call on me and I ask a simple question that changed my life. And the simple question was, how do we know these systems are secure? We're switching from radio frequency, which is a closed controlled network that we know is secure by essence of the frequency that you use. But how do we know the internet, this open network of protocols, is actually secure? We sort of look at each other. And one of the things that the government is, if you ask hard questions, you basically get assigned the task. So they looked at me and said, sir, what's your name? Eric Cole. Eric, you're assigned with a 6-month project of investigating how to secure the internet. Once again, 2 years before the World Wide Web. So I started investigating and I realized a simple fact. There's no way to prove a network is secure. There's no way to prove a network is sound. The only thing you could possibly do is break into it. So that day, I launched my formal career of being a professional hacker for the CIA for 6 years.
Very cool. So that had to be a pretty interesting experience.
Very interesting, especially the fact that there really was no training. Like, I mean, there were a couple of books out there, like some of the really early books, like the Cheswick book, the Wylie Firewalls, and like some crypto books, but there really wasn't a whole lot. Like, you went to the bookstore during the 1990s, and there was maybe like 1 or 2 books on cyber, like very little existed at that time. So it was really me just sitting down, exploring, learning the TCP protocol stack, exploiting, sniffing, gathering data. Once again, not really a whole lot of tools available. So it was more just sort of trial and error, sort of almost like Thomas Edison type, because there really wasn't any of the research that existed today.
Yeah, because most of the stuff back then would have been around phone phreaking.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's not going to help you.
What I always joke with people is, unlike Al Gore that claims he invented the internet, I didn't invent it, but I definitely helped create it. And I was early on with some of the protocols, helped some of the routing companies develop some of the TCP/IP protocol suite, some of the revisions and option fields in those areas. Definitely was heavily involved in sort of watching it grow, launch, and eventually seeing the World Wide Web being developed right before my very eyes.
That's an awesome experience. And just one of the things too, going back to the picking cybersecurity career back then, the only way you could really do cybersecurity would have been for some government agency, because a lot of people I talked to that have been in a long time, like yourself, when they were getting started out and they did security, was because they worked for some branch of the government. Nobody in the public sector was really worried about security.
Exactly. And remember, before 1992, before there were websites, before the World Wide Web existed, there really wasn't firewalls, ideas, like none of that stuff. I mean, we were pioneering that. And this is one where I sort of look back, that hindsight, oh man, if I would have filed patents or created some technology, like in basic firewalls, oh my, Phil, we'd be on my G6 right now, chatting and having a different conversation. I mean, you look back at the time of what to me would seem so obvious and straightforward, and like today is revolutionary technology. I'm like, oh man, I was there and I missed it. But hey, always no better time than the present to take action.
So what happened with your career? Where did you go after the CIA? What did you do next?
So after I left the CIA, I decided two things. One, feds is easy. There wasn't a system I couldn't get into. There's not a system that has functionality that doesn't have vulnerabilities. And testing, exploitation, easy, easy peasy. You could always get in. What I realized is the hard part was prioritizing roadmaps. Really going, okay, I can always get in, but how do I minimize or reduce the risk to make it hard and difficult? So my first decision was I wanted to go into defense. My second decision was I didn't like working for people. I didn't like this idea that, because here's why I left. I built an internet security team. I was running a team of 45 people, but I was only a GS 12. And they basically came to me and said, Eric, you can't run your team anymore. And I'm like, am I doing a bad job? Like, oh no, you're doing an amazing job, but you can't run the team anymore. I'm like, did I fail performance metrics? Did I not meet the, Eric, you're ahead of schedule, but a team over 40 people has to be run by a GS 14. I'm like, great, promote me to a GS 14. Oh, you can't for 7 years. I'm like, what if I save the president's life? They're like, doesn't matter. You can't get promoted time and grade. So I'm like, this is stupid. I'm qualified. I'm running the job. I'm doing an amazing job. And you're going to take it away from me because of some number after my pay scale. So I also decided at that moment, I didn't want to work for myself. And I believe everybody is the CEO of your own company. Everybody needs to focus on building out your career. But I also knew I knew squat about business. So I teamed up with a group of really smart folks and I joined this company called the Cytex Group Inc., where I was their CTO. And we eventually in 2005 sold it to Lockheed Martin, where I then stayed on as their chief scientist and senior fellow for several years.
Very cool. So I would imagine I would think after having the CIA on your resume, it probably made it pretty easy to get recruited, or really a good thing on your resume, I would imagine, working for the CIA, since so few have.
It's, once again, I don't regret it for a second. I tell everybody I know who's getting into cyber, listen, the pay is terrible. The experience is worth every penny. Don't try to get your Ferrari in your 20s. Get your Ferrari in your 40s. Work and get experience in your 20s, because I don't know a lot of people that were making a lot more money than me in the 20s, but they didn't have the depth of experience and they basically flattened out in the 30s. I didn't get paid a lot in my 20s, but then when I got out, I had so much experience and knowledge and expertise that I basically launched my career where now I'm doing extremely, extremely well. So in the beginning, if you're young and starting off, or even if you're new in cyber, spend 5 to 7 years getting the best experience, not the best pay, not the best title, the best experience. And then from there, the money and title will follow.
Yeah, that's great advice. And just, I'm sure I'm sure lots of speaking opportunities came about from having your background.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's one thing where I also learned that I can do entrepreneur. I can run businesses. I built businesses. I've sold businesses. But ultimately, you have to decide what your gift is. And to me, there's really three areas. At birth, we don't get to pick it. We don't get to choose it. But you're either a creator, a manager, or an entrepreneur. So you like creating things, you like managing things, or you like selling things. And I realized this, I'm a creator. I like creating content. And the other thing I learned is I'm a natural born teacher. I love teaching. I love helping. I love explaining. I mean, nothing makes me happier than sitting down with a group of people and just talking about cyber, the future, where it's going. So that's when I really sort of got in my career of teaching, working and helping to build SANs, and really writing some of their top selling courses like Security Essentials and Enterprise Defender, because I'm a natural born teacher that I care about people. So teaching and coaching in cybersecurity was just sort of the natural progression for me.
So how long did you teach for SANS and create curriculum?
So I taught for them for 15 years. I then left, did some consulting, and now I'm really back focused on getting to that point in my career where you make an interesting transition. You're going to make a lot of money. I'm going to be wildly successful. I'm going to have my G6. But it's not about the money anymore. It's about contribution. It's about giving back. It's about waking people up. Because the reality is, we're at war, yet we are still operating under a peacetime mindset. I've had the distinct opportunity to travel to countries that are at war. I've been in Iraq when they were at war. I've been in Korea when they were at war. I've been in Ukraine when they were at war. When you're at war, people act differently. They think differently. They behave differently. They're more secure. They're more aware. They have a wartime mentality than during peace. Now, unfortunately, in the United States, other than the Civil War, we've never been at war. So we don't know what it's like. So most of us are operating on the internet in peacetime conditions. We're operating like we're in peace. The reality is, on the internet, we're at war. And if you don't have wartime mentality and you don't think and act and behave like you're at war, you're going to get targeted. You're going to be a victim, and you and your family are going to get hurt. So that's why I'm sort of using the nickname of America's Cyber Czar to really wake people up, make them aware of the dangers, and start giving practical tips that companies or businesses can do to secure and protect their organization.
So one of the things that's been kind of a hot topic, and one that's very important, in my opinion, is just the misinformation warfare that's going on out there.
Today, I read a few articles and I was on an interview where somebody was asking me, is there a data storage issue? And I'm like, there's not a data storage issue, but I'll be honest with you. There's a data quality issue. There's a data correlation issue. Because here's the reality. You can generate so much data today. I go in sometimes at night and in the morning, and I have my digital twin with AI that's trained and thinks just like me, and I brainstorm with it. So I'm like, okay, what are hot areas? What are this? What are that? What can I do? How can I? And the thing that I realize is I can generate so much data with queries. Write me this, do this, put this, that. And before you know it, within a 5-minute session, I can generate hundreds or thousands of pages of data. But the issue is, am I going to use it? Where's the quality factor? So today, it's not just about a data storage issue. It's about a quality correlation and an access issue. Because let's face it, if I asked you right now, if I asked any listener, where's your data? And you were honest, you'd be like, it's on my phone, it's on my iPad, it's on the cloud, it's on Dropbox, and it's probably in 12 or 15 places. And the reality is, most of those places, you don't own and control your data. If social media tomorrow decided to shut you down, if social media tomorrow decided to put you in timeout, you lose the data. You don't own your data, and you don't know where the data is. And we have lost control of it. We've lost control of the quality. And you're right, we have a data leakage issue where our data is being leaked out and we have no control or ways to protect it, manage it, or secure it.
Hearing that always makes me think back to Facebook when people put up the little messages they saw someone put up. I'm letting Meta know that they don't have, they don't own my data or whatever, and think that's going to work.
Yeah, good luck on that, my friend.
Yeah, that's always funny. That's one of the things too that just kind of shows me that the misinformation stuff is such a risk, because someone just throws a meme out there and everyone believes it. I mean, it's just politically motivated stuff, and it's just kind of amazing that it's that way. You have some people that are owners of some of these big corporations that are billionaires that are complain about freedom of speech, but sometimes when you see they're pushing disinformation.
I don't think it was any secret. Zuckerberg came out and admitted it. But if you went in October, and I'm not political, I'm just stating the facts. If I went in October and I put a statement that said, Donald J. Trump is the next president of the United States, he is the best president for this country, it would be blocked. You would actually get blocked. You would get a warning. And you'd say, if you continue to post this type of content, you will no longer be activated on Facebook. If I change 2 words, if I change Donald Trump to Kamala Harris, and I said the same exact thing, it was allowed. That's insane. Facebook shouldn't be picking sides. They shouldn't be saying that we don't like this person and we do like this person. And that's why I was a little different than most folks, is I thought the TikTok ban was insane. TikTok had nothing to do with the Chinese. The government didn't like TikTok because TikTok wasn't banning content like Facebook was. They didn't like the fact that TikTok was letting you own and control information where Facebook wasn't. So this was all a ploy by the government to limit the information and access we had to. Now think about this. What other country other than a communist state could you wake up on a Sunday morning and not be able to access an app because the government decided they didn't want you to have that information? That's not a democracy. That is not the United States. That is a communist state. So some of the stuff that we see happening is insane in terms of the legislation. And we don't realize that social media is social biased and we're letting them do it to us.
Yep. So yeah, I want to back to the whole TikTok thing. I think some of the Chinese hardware we have in our company, like some of the home Wi-Fi devices and home network devices, are a bigger risk than TikTok.
Exactly. I laugh because you go in and you look at any of your major routers or switches or servers, look at the back. 3 words. Made in China. So wait a second. Our hardware could be made in China. Our routers can be made in China. Our switches can be made in China. That's cool. But the fact that TikTok is a platform that lets us share information is a Chinese company, that's bad. This isn't making sense. Now, yes, if you wanted to ban all Chinese vendors, cool. But we're doing things that are illogical and make absolutely no sense from a cybersecurity perspective.
Yep. That's kind of have to agree with that. Just like I said, because I have someone that's going to be a guest on my show coming up here. I think I got a recording with them next week, but they did some interesting research because their dad bought one of these boxes that were made in China that's for streaming. You get all this free streaming content for free. And she was really concerned what it's doing. And she's like kind of sniffing traffic with Wireshark, seeing some unusual activity and seeing a lot of activity going back to China, and dug a little bit deeper into it. And so that's kind of why I think that, some of these devices like that are a bigger risk, because, there's actually cases where they're getting usable data. What are they really getting from TikTok? I mean, they're getting the same stuff any other social media platform would get, and really not that anything that sensitive outside of, your location, the city you're in or whatever, but nothing, really drastic.
And then the question is they're like, okay, TikTok can only operate if it's owned by a US company. Great. So you're saying that TikTok is bad because it's spying on us. Now, first, just so we're clear, nobody has been able to prove that. The FBI director openly said we have zero proof that TikTok has malicious code. But then Congress is saying it's a Trojan horse planted by the Chinese. Where's the proof? The only proof is they're gathering and spying on us. Great. So a Chinese company can't spy on us, but if you make it owned by the US companies can spy on us. It's just that the logic isn't there and just not making sense of what's happening. And the problem is, I love our government. I think we have the best government system in the planet. I think the three branches of government, Supreme Court, Congress, and the White House, I think is brilliant in terms of how it's set up and how it executes. But here's the reality. It's being run by people that never grew up with technology. It's being run by 50, 60, and 70-year-olds that didn't get their first cell phone until they were 40. They have no business making laws on law. Now, yes, I'm older, but I've lived and breathed this for 30 years. We need people like me and others to actually be helping and working with Congress to actually pass a cyber Bill of Rights. Because the reality is, when the founding fathers of this country wrote the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, they had no idea that the internet and smartphones would ever exist.
Yep. They would really Be amazed if they're around to see it. So what are you doing in your career currently? So you're in business for yourself. So what type of consulting do you do?
I really focus right now on awareness for executives. My big current platform is the CISO role is broken. In most companies, the CISO is viewed as a technical role. It's not. Any title that begins with a C and ends with an O, chief officer. If you are a chief officer, you are responsible for growth and expansion of the company. So let me ask you a question. Name the chief officers at your company. CEO, COO, CFO, CIOC, CISO, Chief Legal Counsel. Now, let me ask you a question. Where do they all sit? They all sit on the executive floor except the CISO. They all work on the executive floor except the CISO. They all meet on a regular basis except the CISO. And they all sit there and coordinate at board meetings except for the CISO. Why is the CISO left out? Why is the CISO not sitting with all the other chief officers? The reality, we view it as a technical role. It's not. The way you become a CISO is by making a career change and moving into a chief officer position. It's not by being a security engineer for 14 years and getting promoted up. A CISO is not a technical role. It could be a transition, but it's not a technical career track. To me, it's a chief officer focused on information security. So until we redefine our CISO and have them as a chief officer, sitting with all the other chief officers, acting like chief officers and behaving like chief officers, we're going to continue to struggle because the reality is IT is a technical problem and can be solved with money. Cybersecurity is a business problem, can only be solved with risk management. So until we stop throwing money at the problem of cyber and we make our chief officers focused on information security, business leaders and thinkers, we're going to continue to suffer harm and damage on the cyber front.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that because I've thought for a while that the chief information security officer wasn't treated the same with the same respect as the other chief executive officers. They seem to be one of the bigger scapegoats. So anything happens wrong with cybersecurity, then they're kind of the one that is their careers put at jeopardy.
Well, you just nailed it. The way most companies view their CISO today is they're the target. Because here's the reality. After some of our large data breaches that we saw over the last 5 or 10 years, boards were getting fed up that the CEO was not focused on cyber. So if you remember some of the big data breaches out there, the CEO got fired after a data breach because they said, you have no one in charge of security. Security is buried under IT. Therefore, you're responsible and you're fired. CEOs don't like unpredictability. They don't like to get fired. So what did they do after that? They now created a CISO that really your job as a CISO is to walk around with a target on your back. And when a data breach happens, you get fired. It's the playbook. Look at any major data breach in the last 3 years. What happened after the data breach? The CISO got fired. And in some cases, the CISO had legal action taken against them. So the problem now is CISOs are not chief officers. They're not cybersecurity people. They're merely somebody you can blame and fire when a data breach happens. That's not a good position to be in. We need to redefine that role as chief officers focused on information security with proper risk management, recognizing that attacks will happen. And our goal as a chief officer is not to prevent all attacks. It's to minimize the frequency and impact that attacks have when they do it.
Yeah, I was talking to someone a while back at a conference that had got a offer for a CISO role, and they were talking about how there was no kind of legal protection for that position, and they kind of turned it down because forget the money wasn't quite there, but they did say that there was like no kind of legal protection for them, so they declined the offer.
Anybody that works in any leadership role or CISO, you must put in your contract, must put in your contract that the company will pay for an an E&O umbrella insurance on you for at least $10 million, errors and omissions. Here's the reality. Every other chief officer has a $10 million errors and omission policy on them, which means if something goes wrong, they are covered. Because here's the reality. Chief officers pierce the corporate veil. Most technical people have no clue what that means. What it means is if you're a security engineer and you screw up, they sue the company, not you. If you're a registered officer of the company, you're a registered chief officer of the company, and the company has some damage done to them, the board or third parties can sue you directly, piercing the corporate veil and holding you personally liable. Security engineers don't know this. Every other chief officer has an errors and omissions policy on them. Chief officers don't. Why not? You need to have the same level of protection. Your company needs to cover you from an umbrella E&O policy for at least 10 to 15 million to make sure you're covered and protected in the case of a breach.
Good to know. So one of the things I really wanted to make sure to discuss with you while we're recording is to get your views on personal branding, because that's a missed opportunity for a lot of people, although people are becoming more aware about personal brands. So what are kind of your views? I've noticed you've done a lot of great stuff, and I can really notice the work on your personal brand.
Personal branding and personal privacy are two separate things. You will never see a picture of my family. You will never see personal information or data about me or my hobbies. You will never see personal information about where I live, what I do, or anything about my personal life. Why? That's none of your business. And you're not going to see political views. You're not going to see personal views. I'm not going to give you my opinion of who I think should be president. Now, yes, I'm going to give you my opinion of whether I think Dodge is violating security issues because it's a security problem, but I am focused on cyber security and teaching the world of who I am. Anybody who works in any career, especially cybersecurity, you have to build your brand, your security brand. I don't want to see personal opinions. I don't want to see personal vacation pictures. I don't want to see pictures of your wife or kids. Save that for private accounts. I want to know, what are your positions on cybersecurity? I want to know you're a thought leader. I want to know you're a mover and shaker, because here's the reality. They don't advertise most security positions. They don't advertise CISO positions. You know how many CISO positions I get offered a week? And what I actually do is I have private clients that I do CISO training or coaching on, and I pass those leads on to them. And they go, Eric, how come you know about all these CISO positions? Very easy. If you go in and you search on CISO, you search on cybersecurity, you search on Chief Information Security Officer on any platform, my name's going to pop up in one of the top 5 slots. Why? Because that's what I do. That's what I breathe. That's what I eat. You need to go in, and when they search on Chief Information Security Officer, they search on cyber, your name needs to pop up. You need to build your brand, a business brand focused on cybersecurity. Nothing personal, nothing biased, no opinions. But if you're not building your brand online, you're going to become unknown in the field of cybersecurity.
Yeah, I agree. That's some great advice. So we're getting down towards the end of the episode. Is there anything you'd like to share before we close it out?
The only thing I would share is cybersecurity is all about staying ahead of the curve. It's all about embracing technology, not fighting it. Like, I remember when cloud computing came out, a lot of security folks are like, oh, it's bad, you can't do the cloud. Guess what? It's here to stay. We see a lot of cybersecurity people fighting AI. AI is here to stay, my friends. What you need to do is figure out how to use it as an enabling tool to secure and protect organizations, not fight it or say it's evil. So always go in. And my rule of cybersecurity is, don't ever say no, you can't do it, it's too risky. Say yes, but here's how you do it in a lower risk environment. To me, to win in this game, don't think of cybersecurity as a roadblock. Think of it as a business enabler.
Great advice. Well, thanks for joining. It was great chatting with you.
Always a pleasure, my friend, and glad we got to finally meet in person, and let's do this again sometime soon.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks, everyone, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you for listening to the Phillip Wylie Show. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. In the meantime, to learn more about Phillip, go to thehackermaker.com and connect with him on LinkedIn and Twitter @Phillip Wylie. Until next time.